proposals for streamlining Curl BC's Playdown system. We hope you are all staying safe and well during this COVID crisis and appreciate that you are taking the time to help improve our game. My name is Scott Braley, and I'm the CEO of Curl BC. Here in North Vancouver, you may be able to hear the horns and the banging that as we do at every day at this time, in tribute to all of the frontline workers in this crisis. To all of you on the call who are sacrificing your safety for the rest of us, please accept our deepest gratitude and take care as best you can. My job tonight is to introduce our three panelists who will take you through the proposed changes and then address your questions. Please note that tonight's meeting is being recorded. Melissa Saligo is Curl BC's High Performance Director. She has been working full-time at Curl BC for 13 years. Originally from Trail, Melissa is speaking to us tonight from Victoria. Will Sutton is Curl BC's Competition Manager. He has been working full-time at Curl BC for 6 years. Originally from Victoria, Will is joining us tonight from New Westminster. Terry Palanchuk is Curl BC's Vice Chair and Competitions Committee Chair. She has been on Curl BC's board for 5 years. Originally from Quesnel, Terry is joining us tonight from Nanaimo. Melissa will be your host tonight, so over to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. Good to have you all here. What a great turnout it's been. I would ask everyone please to take a minute to review our collective responsibility tonight during this webinar. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback, and we're pretty excited about the changes coming up. We want to hear from you, and that is why we are here. We have not made any decisions yet, and we are excited to collect all the feedback going forward. We are hoping this to be a productive process. We all love this sport, and we all have the best intentions and goals supporting curling. Tonight's webinar will be divided into two sections. The Active for Life section, which includes seniors and masters, U15, mixed, club, and stick. The second section will be our performance section for BC Winter Games, U18, U21, men, women, mixed doubles, and wheelchair. Please ask any and all questions through the Q&A section of this webinar. We will go through each segment, pause, and then address each of the questions. Everyone is free to type questions at any point during this webinar, but to ensure we get to as many as possible, we ask that you keep the questions relevant to the section that you just heard. If there are any questions that are unanswered at the end, we will try to put them and their answers on the website in the coming days. Some background information. Curling's landscape has changed over the past many years, and there has been a significant shift in sport, specifically at the higher levels. There is no denying that. But what remains is the pride, knowing our culture of good sportsmanship and our ability to always act in the spirit of curling. Curl BC continues our commitment to all curlers, from the grassroots curler to the highest level of competitive play. We support and promote a variety of participation and competitive opportunities for all. However, it should be noted that there is a distinction between curlers who compete and curlers who are high-performing athletes. This is due to the significant shift in sport and what performance components are required to reach the podium at the national stage. It is no longer enough for top teams to compete solely within their region. They need to have opportunities to compete on a bigger stage and against a variety of teams nationwide and even internationally. We need to be mindful of this when we are creating our programs and our Playdown structure. Curl BC's competitive structure has doubled over the past 10 years to include 19 BC championships, which has created many more options for curlers, including the Club Challenge, mixed doubles, and stick curling. This has resulted in the need to schedule 60 Playdown events around the province, which has strained the capacity of host clubs, their volunteers, and even the Curl BC staff. We really want to ensure that every event matters and that there is the time and the resources to run them in a way that benefits our host clubs and our curlers. It is important to note that we know no system will please everyone. What we do know is that there can be a better system. Based on discussions among Curl BC staff, Curl BC Competitions Committee, competitors, clubs, club managers, and with the feedback from surveys past and present, we have developed the current proposals to revitalize our current competition structure and participation. We have a lot of factors to consider, like can our events fit into an already busy schedule? Who are these that are going to attend? Who will host? And are we able to run these meaningful events? These are all important questions, and I ask that you keep them in mind as we go through the slides. We're going to start off with the Active for Life categories, and I will now ask Terry Pelenchuk to present these.
Thanks, Melissa, and thank you to everyone from our curling community for taking the time to participate tonight. We truly appreciate your input. So starting with the seniors and masters, I will address those categories together since we are proposing the same format for both. We propose an 8-team round robin for each gender with a 3-team playoff. Berths are allocated to the 5 regions, that is, Regions 1 and 2, the Kootenays, Regions 3, 4, and 7, the Okanagan, Region 11, the Lower Mainland, Regions 8, 9, and 10, the Island, and Regions 5 and 6, the North. The 3 remaining berths are prorated amongst those regions. If a region has no entries, that berth will be added to the proration pool. If a region only has 1 entry, that team will have direct entry to the provincial championship. What changed? We propose elimination of the open events as the numbers simply did not warrant holding them, and direct entry is appropriate to encourage participation from all regions in British Columbia. This is especially important in regions where there are relatively few competitive teams, but still allows the opportunity for a competitive team to participate. Moving on to the mixed, we are proposing an open provincial capped at 32 teams with a triple knockout format and a 4-team page playoff. Berths will be allocated on a first come, first served basis, and registration will be early in the season and communicated in the next couple of months. We recognize that mixed teams are largely comprised of high performance athletes who also compete in other categories such as the U18 and U21, women's, men's, and seniors. And we want to ensure that not only in this category, but in every category, we are sending our very best team to represent British Columbia at the national stage. This format will allow teams to form early in the season and can ensure that they can still compete in their respective categories without date conflicts and reduces their time commitments. In addition, this format presents a huge hosting opportunity with potentially 128 athletes, along with their respective coaches, families, and friends in a club for the event, providing a great revenue opportunity for that host club. Moving on to our club championships. For the club championship event, we propose a 12-team provincial with 2 pools of 6 teams and a 14-page playoff. The 12 berths are prorated between the 5 regions, similar to the Masters and the Seniors, with 1 berth being allocated to the host club. As in the Seniors and Masters categories, direct entry will be allowed in regions with only 1 category. So what will change in this category? We propose to eliminate the 2nd berth on the Island, the Kootenays, and the North, as the numbers simply did not warrant a 2nd berth in those regions, and this format aligns with our formats in other Curl BC Active for Life championships. The U15, I'm actually going to leave. We discussed this earlier, and I believe Will is going to speak to that in the high performance, because the U15 is actually a train to train, which leads into a train to compete category. So sorry, Will, if I'm throwing that back out to you, but
no problem. No problem.
So lastly, in our Active for Life, we have our stick category. And the stick event was very successful in its inaugural year last season, so we do not recommend any change to it. The format is an open provincial and a women's provincial. The draw is dependent, of course, on the number of entries in each category. And that wraps up the Active for Life categories. So I turn it back to you, Melissa.
Melissa?
Okay. Yes.
Could you jump back to that U15 one right now, maybe? Because I think that is part of this pathway still. And then we'll just get this over with, because I don't think this is on my slides, is it?
No.
Okay. So the U15 Challenge Cup is an event that leads into our BC Winter Games. And like Terry was alluding to there, the BC Winter Games is kind of a learn to train event and the first multi-sport games experience. So this is a chance for our athletes to go to an event that's like a bonspiel, that has pool play and also has a camp atmosphere. Along with that, it will have, it'll prepare you to go into a regional qualifier called Rockfest that will lead to a national event that's being run by Curling Canada, also called Rockfest. So more information on this will come out in the coming months, and Kim Dennis in the office is our lead on this program.
Okay, so we'll get to some of the questions. I do apologize if everyone's not able to see the PowerPoint the proper way. I've tried to make some adjustments, but I'm not sure what else to do, so I'm just going to have to leave it. So the first question I will throw over to Will first, and then maybe to Scott. Is the proration done the same way as it is now, trying to match the 8 berth allocated as closely as possible to the entries in each region?
I think I can answer this. Yeah, our proration next year will be the same as it was this past year. Is that what the question was?
Yeah, will the proration be done the same way?
Yeah, the formula will be the same. Yeah, and just so you know, that formula has been done consistently for a couple of years now. And there's 2 people in the office who both do it, and then it's checked and then sent out to the teams.
Okay. Another question. Why are there 11 regions? Maybe I'll throw this one to Terry. Are we still have 11 regions?
Forgot to unmute. We actually group them as 5 regions, and we are looking to move towards a zone format, which is similar to the Winter Games, which is actually a format that many of our competitors would be used to. And while there are 11 regions, we do group some of them together, as I mentioned when I outlined the proration and the regional format for seniors and masters. And that is regions 1 and 2 are the Kootenays. We group them together, again, because of numbers. Regions 3, 4, and 7, which are the Okanagan, again, grouped together because of numbers. Region 11 is actually zone 3, 4, and 5, and that becomes 1 region for the Lower Mainland. Regions 8, 9, and 10 are the island, whereas Powell River right down to Victoria. And regions 5 and 6 are the north. So that breaks it down to actually 5 regions, but there are actually 11 geographical regions within the province.
Okay, great. Just another quick proration question. In the senior division, if two regions have the same amount of entries for playdowns, how will the prorated spots be assigned? And I'll throw that either to Will or Scott again.
If there was a tie, I believe it would be a coin flip. If it was a tie, is that correct, Scott?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for everyone for writing these questions. We're going to do our best to get through as many of them as we can. Next question. Was there some consideration that having only 3 games would not be enough value for travel and time off work to go to an event? And Terry, how about I throw that one to you?
Well, I'm not sure which event they're talking to. I suspect it's the mixed. And again, brand new format. We're really looking for input on this. With the seniors and the masters, it is a round robin, an 8-team round robin. With the club championship, it's 2 pools of 6. For the mixed open, we're looking at a triple knockout. But again, it will depend on the number of teams that are registered. And if by chance we get more than 32 teams, what a great problem to have. We would certainly look at a different format.
Okay, great. I will go to Will and or Scott on this one. Why would you want a limitation on teams whatsoever?
Is that in reference to the club challenge, or what is that in reference to?
If you are removing any regional events to pare down finalists, then logic dictates your single event must be open without any limit on entries. So I'm not sure exactly which event, but I think it's talking about getting rid of regional events.
So if I could just, maybe I'll briefly speak to this. I think in these categories, the Sport for Life ones, we really want to ensure that each of our regions, the 5 regions that Terry alluded to there, have an opportunity to take part in a BC championship. And if we just had 5 open events, I think what you might find is 2 really good senior teams from the island or something. One of those teams might go enter that open event in the Kootenays and take that berth away from the team in the Kootenays to go. So if that's what you're talking about, and that would be the reason to me why the Sport for Life categories are really critical for us to ensure each region is sending a team to the provincials to inspire future teams to compete from that region.
I'm taking the question as probably about the mixed, Will. I think it's just capping at 32. I think we're open to going beyond that if there's a capacity at the host club. If that was the question, yeah, we certainly have been discussing that. And again, what I think Terry said, what a great problem to have.
So a follow-up question then to that, Terry or Will, if you're only going to have the single event, will it be permanently held in a geographical center of BC, or will it move around? Where do you see it being located?
When we get to the other categories, the high performance ones, there's some major changes in place there. And one of the things it speaks to is being in proximity to an airport. And when we're looking at host clubs for either the mixed or the mixed doubles, that will be a key factor for us. So BC is a huge province, and we're not in the same boat as Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and those flatter prairie provinces. So we are going to have to ensure that if we're having these open provincials, they are within proximity to an airport. That helps answer it.
Great, thanks, Will. This is a question I had too, so Terry, I'm going to throw this one to you. Why is there not a men's stick category?
That's a great question, and a question that I personally had myself. And this is a relatively new category for us here at Curl BC. And it's being run by a really great group of volunteers. And apparently this is the format that works for them. And I will allude back to my outline when I was outlining that category in the Active for Life. The format worked really, really well for last year, which was the inaugural season. We don't see any reason to change that. As I said, again, there's a great group of people running this event. That's the way they like it, so we're not going to mess with it.
just one thing to add to it, we have a national championship for that event, and we send an open rep and we send a women's rep. So it's also the way that we are able to align with what happens at the national level. And hopefully we'll see Curling Canada adopt the Stick Curling Nationals as one of their national championships in the years to come.
Okay, great. We're moving along here. Mixed is under the Active for Life participation. Why is it being proposed to better suit high performance athletes? Will, I'm not sure.
I can answer
okay.
this. So having the 32 team provincial at the end of the season, it's about creating an Active for Life atmosphere, a bonspiel atmosphere, and a great time. At the same time, like all of our Sport for Life championships and high performance championships, our goal is to send the best team possible to the national championships. And in this particular category, it also leads to a world championship. So we're balancing a couple of things here. We want to make sure everyone gets to compete in mixed who wants to. And we also want to make sure that we're able to have teams that are world class play in the category. So it's one of those categories where we're trying to meet high performance and sport for life. There might be some other ideas out there. Maybe we should separate those two. But at this point in time, I'm not sure participation numbers would support that sort of thing. So this is where we've kind of landed as a proposal for everyone at this time.
Okay. And then speaking of the mixed 32 team, do you have Will, I'll look at you. Do you have an estimate as to how many days that might take?
The 32 team mixed, I'm hoping that what we looked at in the number of draws, if we're doing it in an 8-sheet or more club, would be like a 5-day schedule.
Okay.
Right now, mixed is a 4-day schedule, so you are adding some time onto that event, but not for all the competitors. When you look at if it's a triple knockout, I think 8 of your teams go bingo, bango, bongo, like lose 3 straight. So you start to eliminate teams fairly quickly with the triple knockout format. And just going back to that other question about whether that's a meaningful competition, I think at our level, providing 3 games in a playdown or a provincial is sort of that standard for Curl BC. I think we're meeting a standard when we do that.
Great, thanks, Will. For any questions that have some things for us to consider, like this next one, like would you consider 2 semifinals if a team was tied for 4 teams are tied for first? Those are things that we're not going to talk about right now, but we are going to take that information and put it into our notes for review after this presentation. So we still have quite a few questions to get through. So just so you know, I see some people raising your hands, and we're not going to open your mics because there's like 150 people on here. So it's not going to be possible to do that. So I encourage you to write some questions, and if we don't get to them, we will try and post them in a few days' time. Just another quick question on the open events. I think I can answer this one. Why would we cap them? I think as Terry's alluded to, and maybe also Will, if we see a drastic number, which is a good problem to have, come in, we wouldn't cap them. We would try and look at having more teams entered into it. We're not going to stop at 32 and have 20 teams on the wait list. So that is something that we have heard many times, and we are going to take that into consideration. I'm just going to try and I will look at Will or Terry. Have you ever considered giving the defending champ direct entry into the senior and masters provincials like it's done in the men's and women's? I guess I kind of answered that myself.
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and answer that, Melissa. I mean, that, it's something that I don't know that we've ever really considered, but it's probably a great question. And these are the kind of questions that we love to have, because if it's never been on our radar before, then perhaps it should be.
Yeah, in fairness, I just said if we have considerations here, we're gonna take those out and put them in our notes to move forward. So sorry about that, Terry. Will, is there a proposed rotation for how the mixed playdowns will move around the province?
So basically, if the mixed playdown goes to an open event, it will fall on our provincial category event. So we have a whole bid process for that. So if you go to the Curl BC website under hosting events, you can select on bidding on the mixed, and that's how clubs go about bidding on that. My primary goal on it, if it goes to this 32 team event, will be finding an 8-sheet facility. I'm open to host sites on that. We've had some clubs already express interest in the mixed provincials, but no host sites are solidified for next year yet, with the exception of the men's and ladies in Kamloops, of course.
Right. Scott, a quick question for you. Just somebody asking, how does the coin flip work? And I know we're getting a little bit off topic here, but just maybe you could answer that one.
Well, it's when we have a tie for the final berth for the playdowns in the when we're prorating, and if it's a complete tie, then we flip a coin with a witness, and that's how it works. It's very objective.
Great, thank you. There's a question here regarding the U15. I'm going to take that one offline, and I will make sure we get you an answer for that one. So I'll ask Lindsay. Lindsay Shannon in our office is doing all the questions behind the scenes here. So Lindsay, can you save that one for us for later? Again, another question just about rules. So I'm going to take that one offline as well. For mixed open, would you ever consider opening up above 32, which I think we already agreed to? What if it fills up before, say, the men's and ladies provincials are over? And how would this affect eligibility for club championships? Did that make sense, Will?
Yeah, I think I can answer it. From my understanding, mixed is no longer, we can review that club championship eligibility in the rules, but I don't believe mixed is in that category anymore.
Okay. Sorry.
And what was the other question? The first one.
That's correct, Will. What you just said. Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
The other one's gone.
The other question. Just
we already
overall,
talked about opening it up.
We haven't had 32 competitors so far enter these categories. So like everyone's alluding to, if we get there, we will adapt our format, and maybe we'll need to even go to a situation where we have 2 host clubs or something like that if we got over 32 teams. But we are totally open to having that problem and would love it. We're just being realistic when we kind of pick those formats, but we've definitely looked at the low numbers and looked at the big numbers, and we're excited about those formats should they get approved.
Okay, again, the questions are fast and furious here, so we're going to have to take a lot of these offline. Again, if it's just a comment or consideration, we will address those. Just maybe a quick question for Terry. Has there been any consideration of open provincials for seniors or any of the other categories, as well as the mixed and mixed doubles?
Sure. The open concept has been on the table for probably as many years as I've been on the board. And it's something that we floated around quite a bit, but we still come back to the responses that we hear from the curling community is that in Active for Life, they really want regional representation. So they want the teams to be able to have the opportunity to represent their region at a provincial event. And that's what we're hearing. And that's why we're proposing going back to that straight regional representation again next year. Doesn't mean it's set in stone. Open is something we've certainly tossed around for a long time, and we will likely continue to toss it around for another long time. But until we get over the hurdle of people really wanting to see regional representation, then I think this is where we're at for now. But I thank you for that.
Question for Will. I'm just going to take a few more here because there's still like 20. So again, we apologize that we can't get to them all. Will, how does direct entry ensure the top teams are attending the provincials?
For sure. So in these categories, it's kind of about a balance. And we do want the top teams at the provincials. So we believe that by having a regional competition where you have an opportunity to qualify for your region, that you're getting a great chance to get there. On the other hand, we want to balance that every region wants to have a representative at the BC Championships. In the Sport for Life categories, we hear that loudly, and what we've proposed here represents that. In the future, I'll be presenting on some of the high performance categories, and due to some changes in our landscape of our sport that Melissa alluded to earlier, we're proposing some changes to that. But this is the reason that in the Sport for Life categories that we feel direct entry is a good thing. And there are so many competitors that I can think of from those communities who maybe went to a provincial, went 0-7, but then maybe 3 provincials later, they were having a good record. So sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent there, but I think those direct entries will lead to great competitors down the road for BC in curling.
Okay, and there's quite a few questions about mixed, so we'll take those ones offline. And if anyone does have any other suggestions, feedback on format, I know there's a couple in here that we will definitely look at. We do, I don't know if you have the data in front of you, Will, but some people are just asking about the historical data. I'm not sure I don't know how you want to address that.
If anybody is interested in historical data, I have it on an Excel spreadsheet for all categories. Thanks to, it started with Heather Beatty, and Shannon kept it going. And we go back to 2011, 2012, I think, with all the numbers for all the Curl BC categories. We don't go earlier than that just because we don't have that data. But if anyone's interested in that information, shoot me an email and I'm happy to share it with you.
Just from the big numbers, it was interesting. We looked at this a year ago, and the total number of entries, once we reduced the entry fees a little bit, was over 1,300, and that's including players that were played in multiple categories. But we're offering twice as many events, and I think that's the capacity piece that we're trying to address here, is that although it's the same number of competitors, having to run twice as many events, and a lot of them with playdowns, is really stretching the capacity, not just of Curl BC, but our clubs being able to host. So it probably dropped a bit this past year, but Will, I think it would be correct to say we're at the same level as we were 10 years before a year ago.
Thanks, Scott, because that does answer a couple of the questions here. And again, if anyone needs specifics, obviously Will's got that information. Also, there's a couple questions about dates and concern about date conflicts, etc. I know Will will be working on getting all the dates out and published. Will, do you have a proposed time that you might be having our competitive calendar out?
If anyone has any specific questions about dates, with the exception of things like next year's mixed provincial, last year's mixed provincials, we're still working on a couple of those details. But if there are questions about next year's provincial dates, we have those available now. So I can shoot me an email, but I will also work with Rebecca on getting a press release out in the near future with those dates for our at least for our provincial competitions. And the regional events are pretty much there as well.
And I think one of the main things that it was on one of the infographics that was done ahead of time is that one of the things we are trying to do is to eliminate any conflicts. So I see some questions here regarding conflicts, especially around the club challenge. And that is one thing that we are trying to eliminate for sure.
Yeah, another place we've really done that is by making mixed and mixed doubles open. We've front loaded mixed doubles and we've back loaded mixed. So for high performance curlers or for Sport for Life curlers, those two categories are open to you as well. So I think everyone should be pretty happy with the schedule. And if you have any feedback on it though, please provide it.
Great. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Terry, for the presentation. I'm going to stop us there, and we're going to head into the performance categories. And Will, you've been doing a lot of talking, but I'm going to look to you to make your presentation.
Okay, cool. First off, just hi again, everyone. I looked through all the names on the attendees, and I think I know everyone on there. So I feel like we're in like the world's biggest curling chat party of the night. So that's great. So it's nice to see everyone tonight. But here we go with the BC Winter Games. We're going to stick with our previous formats for this. So in this, we have it divided up into 8 zones and 1 representative from each of those zones. This event will occur every second year, And on the year that it doesn't occur, we'll have the U15 Challenge Cup. No changes to this category. There might be some changes down in the technical package of the event, but no changes around age eligibility and that sort of thing for this category. In the U18s, this is very similar to our other Sport for Life categories. So we get, unlike the BC Winter Games, we're getting back to having five regions here and going to the provincials based on proration. So we'll have the island, the north, we'll have the Kootenays, we'll have the Okanagan, and we'll have the Lower Mainland. And then each one of those regions will get one berth, and then the other 3 berths will be done by proration. Once you get onto the provincials, it'll be an 8-team round robin and a 3-team page playoff at that event. A new change to this will be that direct entry is okay. So just like the Sport for Life categories, in hopes of answering some questions here, the reason we feel direct entry is okay at the U18 level is we really want to ensure that U18 teams in regions stay together. And if direct entry is okay, what we're hoping to see happen is that teams in the north and teams in the Kootenays will form within their region, stay together, rather than maybe seeing what we've seen a little bit of in the past and seeing 1 or 2 of those curlers moving out of the region. So the goal here is to have that. We've eliminated the open event in this category as well. On to the next one, Em. Thanks. So for our U21 category, we're going to have the same 8-team round robin that we have at the U18s. It'll be a 3-team playoff, so a semifinal followed by a final. In terms of the berths, we're increasing the berths. Last year we had 1 berth on the BC Junior Curling Tour. We're now increasing the berths to 3, or proposing that we increase them to 3. The reason for this change is what we found last year on the tour is if with only 1 berth, it wasn't as competitive towards the last tour event. So we're hoping that by having 3 berths on the junior tour, we can encourage teams to keep playing those tour events. And that's really where we think teams will get better faster, is by taking part on the BC Junior Curling Tour and battling against each other. In terms of playdowns in the U21 category, this is a major shift. We're going to go to 2 open events. So previously we would have had the regional events, just like the U18s. We're going to go backwards here to having open event number 1 with 3 berths and open event number 2 with 2 berths. So in terms of the avenues to get to the provincials in U21, you've got the tour, then you've got open event number 1, then you've got open event number 2. However, you can form with athletes from all over the province in this category because it's open events and there'll be no regional entries kind of limited there. We can go on to the next one now, Em. Okay, this is our men's category. So last year we expanded this event to a 16-team triple knockout. Many of you who are on the call were at that event. We're going to go back to an 8-team round robin with this event. So it's been a long time since the men's did this. We've done a 10-team round robin as well, but we're going to go back to this 8-team round robin, just like the women's, hopefully with a 3-team playoff is the proposal. Should it be proposed, the way the berths will be distributed is the defending champion would get 1. The CTRS champion, so that's the Canadian team ranking system. So the team that earns the most points on the tour would, those top 2 teams would qualify. And then we also have the BC Curling Tour, which was started through Curlers in BC, along with Curl BC, about 2 or 3 years ago now. So the BC Curling Tour will have 2 of those berths. We are shifting in the men's to open events. So you'll see now we just have open event number 1 with 2 berths and open event number 2 with 1 berth. What's new here? Well, it's the 8-team round robin. We've added a CTRS spot, and we're shifting away from those regional events into the open event kind of idea. And then the 3-team playoff, it will be new as well here. On to the women's, Em. Okay, great. Not a lot to tweak here in the women's. The feedback we got over the years has been that this category or this format works well. So we're going to stick with the 8-team round robin. We are going to a 3-team playoff. So that's new. Previously, it was a 4-team playoff. By making this change, we reduce some of the tiebreaker implications. We don't eliminate them. We still have lots of tiebreaker implications that we have to account for in terms of scheduling, which is a challenge, but we do reduce them. In terms of the distribution of berths, we'll have our defending champion. We'll have 2 CTRS winners. Now we'll have 2 BC Curling Tour qualifiers. And then we'll have open event number 1 for 2 berths. And this is a change now. Open event number 2 would just have that 1 berth. Or actually, I think that was a change maybe last year. Either way, that's the proposal. Moving on to the next one. Okay, and mixed doubles. This is some major changes here. So proposing we go later in the season with this event, earlier in the season with this event. So it'll be early January, well before the men's and ladies provincials. And we're proposing that we do a 32 team provincial here with a triple knockout. It'll be a 4-team page playoff, and the entries will be a first come, first serve. Should we get a lot of entries, which would be a great problem to have, we'll look at changing this format to something that would be more, be able to take on the number of teams. The reason we pick 32 though is that's kind of a goal. I don't believe we've gotten there in participation numbers in the past. We did have this format back in Kelowna a number of years ago. I participated in that provincial, as I think Jim Cotter won it, and it was a great event. So really excited to see this format back. No playdowns here. And please stay tuned with Rebecca's kind of announcements on social media around signing up for this event when you can. Wheelchair. In terms of format, we're not really proposing any changes here. What we are proposing, though, is that we shift to ensuring this event is taking part when either other regional events are happening or when other provincial events are happening, if possible. A couple ideas out there right now is maybe this event could take place in Cranbrook during the men's and ladies. And then we're also looking at maybe it can align with another event. So really open to hearing from host sites on this event. So if there's any wheelchair curlers on the call tonight and you go, yeah, my club's really interested in hosting this, please reach out.
Thank you, Will. My computer just lit up, whoops, with questions. Okay, so let's get started.
Sorry,
Will,
I talk so fast. I'm trying to talk slower.
Yeah, that's okay. So Will, I'm assuming that a lot of these will go to you. So I'm gonna put you on the firing lane here. You ready? For the tour, I guess for the tour, why would you have chosen to put in 3 berths for the juniors? I'm assuming that's for the U21.
Sure, I can give you an attempt to answer this one. So we have a BC Junior Curling Tour committee that work together. The leads on that are Melissa Sligo, Daniel Wenzek. In the past, it's been Jim Cotter, among all the other Steve Kopf and many others who help out with that every year. We started the tour with 4 berths. So the first year we ran it, we had 4 spots went directly to the provincials and 4 spots went to the regional events. Then we went to 2. And then last year we went to 1. So it's just natural that this year we do 3, right? No, that's not the reason. 3 is sort of the number that we've come up with in thinking that will keep things competitive. Maybe 2 is the right number. Maybe 3 is the right number. But our goal is to make sure that one team doesn't run away with the tour spot and deter other teams from entering tour events. I hope that answers the question.
It does to my satisfaction at the moment.
Well, if I can just jump in on that too, and just having spoken to a lot of the competitors and coaches at the U21 event in Victoria this past season, a lot of the feedback was that 1 spot simply wasn't enough to warrant the time and the effort that the teams put into traveling to those events. So I'd like to think that the increase in the number of spots was to recognize that the commitment that those teams had put into traveling to the tour events.
Yeah, great point, Terry. And from my lens and Melissa's lens, we want to make sure those teams are at the BC Championships as well, as those teams are the ones that are competing the most and training the most in the U21 category.
Thanks, guys. I just want to reiterate, and that we are open to all ideas and we are looking for your feedback. We have not made any decisions. This is a proposal. So if we've misspoken in any way, I apologize, but please understand that we are looking for your feedback. So just going on to the next question, either maybe Terry, just to give Will a bit of a break here. why you're not having regional events in the U21, for example, the same as the U18.
Well, the U21 is really one of our high performance events. And this is an event where I think it's pretty clear, and we can see historically that our U21 teams are really the segue into our men's and women's, which is our high performance category, where we're really, really looking to put the best possible representative on that national stage. I think Team Tardy is a great attestament to that, having won the Worlds 2 years straight. So regional events are great in our Active for Life categories, but once we get into our U21 and our men's and women's category, now we're really strictly looking at performance, and we're looking at the teams who have really put in the time and made that commitment to be the best they can be and really train to win. Melissa, you would know that more from the teams that are registered with your high performance program, but I really believe that the U21 category falls into that category.
I heard a beep.
When we made this change as well, one of the Terry talked about historical numbers. The reality is that for a number of years now in the junior category, we either had 0 entries in the North and the Kootenays, or we had 1 entry, or maybe we got up to 2 entries, and that second team was only usually entering just so that a playdown occurred, because we have rules in place at the current time that require 2 teams to be in a playdown for that to happen. So the evidence really shows that we weren't getting meaningful competitions in U21 in these regions anyhow. I'm not necessarily speaking for the island there, but I think if you even look at the island, you'll see that the number of teams in U21 hasn't been huge the last few years. So when we look at why we're going to open events, it's also just the number of teams that compete in the category too.
Thanks, Will. I'll answer this next one regarding the page playoff. We're thinking that if we were to go to an 8-team round robin, one of the thoughts we had is to not have the page system is because that you would qualify half the field, and we've had a lot of feedback on that. If we had more than 8 teams, I would assume, or we would propose likely going back to the page. But for 8 teams, we thought going to the 3-team playoff would be better, so that we're not qualifying half the field, and that half the field could even be under 500 at that point. So that's one of the reasons that we have considered going to the 3. And I can tell you from my standpoint, my goal is trying to prepare teams to go to the national events. We try and mimic that as best we can, but our numbers are also important that we need to look at and to try and do what's best for our province. Okay. For the men's, Will, is there any discussion? I think you could probably use a couple different geographical areas here, but is there any discussion about, I'm going to call it direct entry from, say, or at least one guaranteed island-based open event every second year? Sorry, that's the question. Is there any discussion about at least one guaranteed island-based open event every second year?
So because there's only 2, this is the men's, right, Melissa?
Correct. Because
there's only 2 open events, that wouldn't be possible. It would be very unbalanced to the other 4 regions, obviously. So what we're more looking at it from more of our principle or our standard will be proximity to an airport. So the Victoria Curling Club would make sense because of its proximity to an airport. The Nanaimo Curling Club would make sense because of its proximity to an airport. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Will, I'm just going to get you to, if you could explain, so I'm just trying to find the question here, the criteria for a CTRS berth.
Yeah, so the CTRS, I want to say your top 7 events that are part of the World Curling Tour can count towards the 2 CTRS berths. It might be 8, I'm not positive, but that's not really too relevant. So you can use all the BC Tour events to count towards that. Plus, if you travel outside of BC and you go to, say, Alberta or Manitoba or Saskatchewan and you earn World Curling Tour points there, you can also get points. You can also get points towards the berth of the provincials there. So the Canadian team ranking system is for those teams that play in BC and travel outside of BC. And from a high performance lens, we want to encourage that so that Curl BC can start to see teams on the podium at the Brier and the Scotties.
Okay, from a scheduling standpoint, Will, I think I know the answer to this one, but I'll just give it to you being the competitions manager. Will there ever be 2 open U21 events in the same region?
No, that would not be our goal. Our goal would be to have 2 U21 events in different regions within proximity to an airport. Now, after this past 2 months, I never want to say never, because this has been quite a life experience here, with just all the adaptations we've all had to make to talking on these types of apps and things like that. So we're prepared, maybe, but our goal would be to not have that.
Okay, thanks. Again, there's just another question about the playoff format, and that's simply because there was just a couple thoughts on that. One was about the qualifying 3 teams rather than 4, simply not qualifying half the field. The other thought I believe we had was with the 4 teams, we felt that there could be more options for tiebreakers, and that we had to add in that whole extra day and a little bit to accommodate for possibly 3 tiebreakers. So those are a couple of the reasons, but again, we're happy to look at the formats moving forward.
To make it a bit practical, if you're having any trouble getting that, to me 3 and 4 is too many losses to maybe go to the Brier or the Scotties, and that's what we're trying to eliminate. Kind of the possibility of is that a record below 500 would advance.
Okay, Will, again, would the spot go to the defending champion if they do not have 3 of the 4 returning players from the previous year for men's and women's?
I'm not sure I'm supposed to answer this because it's a rules question, but I will.
Oh, okay.
It's 3 of 4, I believe.
Maybe Scott can jump in here for
the Curl BC rules is where we have that in black and white.
Scott, do you want to answer that, or?
Sorry, Melissa, I was just reading some of the other questions. Can you say that one again for me?
Can you just clarify that? Do you need 3 of 4 players to come back as returning champion?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, just wanted to confirm that. We know it was a rules question.
I think, sorry, Melissa, I think
Rebecca.
Jordan's question was actually, where would the berth go if the returning champion wouldn't come? But I don't think we have that set in stone yet, so it is a good question.
I believe
we have discussed it.
Yeah.
And the discussion was that it would go back into the regional proration. But again, this is all still a proposal. So all of this is still up for discussion, just to be clear about that with everybody. But this piece we have discussed, and at the moment we're looking at if a defending champion could not form their team, it wouldn't go to last year's second place team. It would go back into the proration mix. Not the proration mix, into the open event, to the second open event. My apologies.
Sorry, Tot. My apologies as well for getting your question wrong.
Yeah, to the second open event, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Too many old playdowns.
Okay, for the men's playdowns, in a province that seems to struggle with numbers of entries for events, are we worried about losing some of the teams that previously would have participated if we participate to have a chance in a 10, 12, or 16 team provincial?
So we expanded the provincials last year with that in mind. And the entries went from 29 the previous year to 22 or 23 this past year, or even less than that, I believe. So we thought that would be the case, but it wasn't. And so what our theory here is, by going back to 8, is we really want to make the BC Championships a meaningful competition to earn your right to get to. So when it's a 16-team event, it just seems like everybody's there. By going to 8, we really can ensure that everyone will have to battle hard against each other to earn that opportunity. But definitely still looking at those other options that you've all thrown out there with 10 teams and 12 teams, it just makes for different draws. I might have said more than I needed to there, but I hope that helped answer.
Okay, so again, we're up to about 45 questions to go here, so obviously we won't get to them all. In terms of scheduling or comments, we'll take those ones offline. Here's a good question for mixed doubles, a discipline which qualifies a team to go to the Olympics. It's an Olympic event. Is the first come, first served format the right one? Will?
Good question. The idea here is that the reason we've gone to the open event is many of our high performance teams have not been able to participate in this category because of the scheduling conflicts. So the main reason we're going to the open event is to, what's our topic here? It's to streamline everything. So we're trying to go to an open event to make it fewer competitions that everyone can participate in. So hopefully we can have BC reps who represent us really well at the nationals in every one of these categories, from sport for life all the way up to high performance. Okay,
I'm going to give Will a quick break here. Scott, I'm going to look to you for the next question. Will potentially the cost of playdowns decrease at all?
We've been discussing that as recently as yesterday. We know the costs from Curling Canada have finally been reduced for the competitors' fees. It only took us about 6 years to get that done, and it does give us a little leeway. Plus, with what we're all going through now and the lead up to the next season, we're concerned about everybody's resources, and so it's under discussion, I think is the best way to leave it, Melissa, at this point, but serious discussion. And what is the right price point? I would say the maximum we'll charge is $400 and not have a late fee or whatever was happening this past year where it went up as high as $440. $400 max, $300 minimum, somewhere between those two numbers is what we're looking at.
Great, thank you. I know there's been a lot of questions and comments around the men's event from 16 to going to potentially 8. Again, we've had lots and lots of feedback, so we're not going to address those comments because we're going to take all that back to the committee, and that's going to be another discussion on how many teams for the men's based on what we see. So it is a drastic cut from 16 to 8, but based on the numbers last year, that was what we had originally proposed. The U18 category, I'm not sure if I've asked this question already. Why are we not suggesting an open event? I'm not sure if that's come up yet.
So good question. I guess the U18 used to have an open event last year. We had that cash bill that a team could pre-qualify for. One of the reasons that we don't have a qualifier for the U18s is we don't have a U18 tour yet. So if we had meaningful competitions that were just U18 eligible teams playing against each other, we might be able to start having like a way that we would have a qualifier through that. But at this point in time, we don't have that. So that's one reason. Another reason is the stage of development for U18. It could be anywhere from like a learn to train to a train to train to a train to compete athlete. So we want to make sure that we still have regional competitions at that stage of development in all the regions of BC. So U18 is not quite as high performance, you could say, as U21.
Okay, we have a lot of questions about the tour and how the spots are allocated. And Will, I'll look to you, and I'm not sure if someone else wants to jump in on this one, but is there any talk or discussion on increasing the number of events, tour events throughout the province? Tour? Maybe both.
Yeah, so right now, for us, thank goodness Curling Canada has extended the junior season for us. So U21s now has a later national championship. So we've got a huge window now where we can build some more competition into the U21 schedule. So the short answer to me would be yes. But the problem is right now we don't have enough teams competing. So we'd have to have more teams competing to have those more events. The other thing on the junior tour that we think we have some room for would be to have events in the North or the Kootenays. The trouble there is we don't have teams yet willing to travel up there. So maybe if we could hold a tour event within proximity to an airport in the North or the Kootenays, then there would be that appetite for it. But that's on the junior tour side. That's sort of my answer. On the other tour side, I believe our men's tour is 6 events and our women's tour was 5 events last year. I thought it was a pretty solid schedule. The only time I thought we could add any events in was January. I believe the tour committee, Curl BC, along with competitive curlers, have a committee of people that work together on the kind of the standards and best practices for both these tours. So we're working right now on that schedule, but I believe Daniel Wenzek, who coordinates that little job, is quite a ways along in it. But yeah, we'd love to see men's and women's tour events in the North and Kootenays as well. The challenge is with those events right now is they do have tour events in those regions, but they're men's and women's combined, and that doesn't align with the Canadian team ranking system requirements. So one of the easiest things we could do is if we could encourage events like the Nelson Cash and the Quesnel Cash to become men's and women's cash wheels, our tour would be complete. But that would be a major change for those events. And I think they have a lot of good reasons not to make that change, which probably has to do with participation numbers. And I'm probably talking too long for one question.
Thanks, Will. I was just going to cut you off anyways. So I know there's some concern about where the state of the world is right now in terms of sponsorship and the tour and stuff. And we have all that under consideration, and we are talking about it constantly on day to day. So just stay tuned for any updates. And, we're trying to make decisions based on what we know at the time. So we're doing our best there.
Melissa, do you?
Sorry, Scott?
Yeah, I just was going to comment. I was reading a report just before we started here saying that it would be reasonable to consider that it'll be a 2-year recovery when it comes to sponsorship. So I think we need to walk into this next season with eyes wide open that there probably won't be as much corporate support as everybody recovers from this. And, we'll just all have to work together to make it work, and we'll try to develop a scenario that's attractive for the clubs to host. And it may mean some special approach for next year with a view to the following year. But eyes wide open, yeah, it's not going to be the same for at least a year.
Thanks, Scott. I also did want to mention, just to reiterate, that we have liaisons at each of our events every year. And those liaisons, as Terry Palanchuk mentioned earlier, they speak to the athletes, they speak to the coaches, they speak and try and get some information so that we can gather as much information as possible. So in the question, we are trying to ask curlers from all over the region, all over the province and all the regions in terms of helping us make the best proposal we can. We know it's not easy, and we know it's not going to be to everyone's 100% satisfaction, but we are going to do our best. So
just to build on that, Melissa, I want to thank the over 200 people who have responded to surveys, because that's a super valuable way that we can make informed decisions. If we can't always go with the majority rules, but in some cases we can definitely use that information to make good decisions.
So I'm just quickly whipping through these questions here. I think the majority of them are kind of repetitive. And again, we will try and get as many answers as we can out. So I think based on the time, just after 8 o'clock here, you guys, thank you for hanging in there with us. I am just going to go over to the summary and closing, and we'll again try to get to your questions as we can in the next few days. So again, we just like to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight, to ask your questions and to provide us feedback. And I can't emphasize enough how much we appreciate your time. And we will be looking at all of the questions and all of the feedback. I guarantee you we'll have a good look at it, and we're going to try and come up with what we can for what's best in our province. I want to emphasize that I truly believe in all of us and our passion for this sport. It's such an amazing sport. And we have to remember that we all want what's best for BC. However, we need to keep in mind the changing times that our sport is going through, and we need to do what's best for our active for life competitors as well as our high performing competitors. And so on that note, I will send it over to Scott for some final thoughts.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks very much to the three of you. You did a great job, and of course, thanks to everybody on the line here. It was very interesting trying this for the first time, and well done to our staff for encouraging us to take this approach. So it's not easy to oversee change, but we're glad so many of you joined us tonight to help with this process. A number of key themes emerged for me, and so that I wanted you to know what the next steps are, and here's what's planned. The competitions committee will review the feedback from this webinar's questions, the over 200 surveys that Will mentioned, and the many email messages we've received. A final draft of the changes will be circulated by May 15th. So we're going to take a month to do this right. It won't be perfect, but hopefully everybody will have had their say. You might not all get your way, but you'll all have had your say. And we'll try it, and we'll look in the following year or two to see if improvements can be made from there. If it looks like a contingency plan will be required for the COVID crisis, then this will be circulated in draft form by June 30th. I think, as we all know, things are changing daily. We don't know if there'll be a second wave and all those things. Fingers crossed, we'll get through the worst of it in the next few weeks, and we'll have a season as usual. Our plan right now, we have 3 possible scenarios, and we're working very closely in our staff to come up with what those 3 scenarios look like. But the first scenario would be season as usual, and with the changes that we announce on May 15th. So in the meantime, please take care, everyone. Stay safe and stay the course so we can get back to a more normal life in the fall. Thanks, everyone, and good night.